In 1914, a newspaper ad called for men willing to undertake a hazardous journey, offering small wages, bitter cold, and long months of complete darkness. In an era without GPS, radar, or radio, navigating the Southern Ocean relied entirely on maps and a sextant. The man who placed that ad was Sir Ernest Shackleton. His ambition was to land on the coast of the Weddell Sea and walk across the entire Antarctic continent, a feat no one had ever accomplished. He assembled a crew of 27 sailors, scientists, and carpenters, along with 69 sled dogs and one stowaway who snuck aboard before departure. They loaded onto a custom-built wooden ship named the Endurance. By December, the Endurance pushed into the Weddell Sea. This stretch of water, wedged against the Antarctic coast, is notoriously hostile, packed with dense, floating ice layers that shift with the currents. Within weeks, the temperature plummeted. The loose sea ice fused together, expanding rapidly until it locked completely around the ship's wooden hull. This map outlines their predicament. Shackleton miscalculated, believing Vassal Bay was further south, and sailed the Endurance into dense ice. While trapped, ocean currents caught the pack. Over several months, the frozen sheet drifted north, pulling them away from the continent. The mission of exploration was over. For the 28 men stranded on the pack ice, the environment was now their only focus. To prevent the crew from succumbing to the pitch-black Antarctic winter, Shackleton enforced strict routines, organizing moonlight walks and dog races to keep their minds engaged during the long months of waiting. By October, the shifting pressure of millions of tons of ice finally buckled the state-of-the-art vessel, tearing open the hull and crushing its internal structure. As freezing water flooded the decks, Shackleton ordered an immediate evacuation. The men were instructed to abandon everything but the absolute bare essentials required to stay alive, dumping heavy gear onto the ice. The Endurance soon slipped beneath the surface. Without a ship, their safety net had vanished, leaving 28 men standing on a frozen ocean with zero shelter and limited supplies. The crew pitched a few small canvas tents directly on the drifting frozen sea surface, creating a makeshift settlement they called Ocean Camp. Their standard rations of biscuits and meat paste quickly dwindled. They resorted to hunting stray seals and penguins, but the wildlife was sparse and unpredictable. With starvation setting in, they had to make a horrific choice. The men shot their remaining sled dogs to preserve their own food, eventually eating the dog meat to stay alive. By April, rising temperatures weakened their frozen foundation. The solid sheet beneath the camp cracked open, forcing an immediate retreat. They dragged the 3 small lifeboats they had salvaged from the Endurance and launched them directly into the freezing sea. Out on the water, the physical toll was extreme. Their clothes froze solid against their skin. Severe frostbite blackened their feet, and their throats became so parched they couldn't swallow food.
For 7 continuous days and nights, they rode through violent ocean storms, constantly bailing seawater to keep the small vessels from sinking in the swells. The men realized this was the first time they had touched solid Earth in 497 days. Each time their platform failed them, they were pushed into a deadlier environment, trading a sinking wooden ship for cracking sea ice and cracking ice for the open sea. Elephant Island was a barren rock battered by winter storms. To keep the men from despairing, Second-in-Command Frank Wild led daily routines and repeatedly promised the crew that the boss would eventually return for them. But the island sat hundreds of miles outside of any commercial shipping lanes. Without a radio, accidental discovery was impossible. Hitting solid ground provided an illusion of safety, but remaining on that beach meant they would eventually freeze or starve. Knowing rescue would never come to them, Shackleton chose 5 men and prepared the James Caird, a tiny 22-foot wooden lifeboat, to go find help. This map details their target. They had to sail 800 miles across the Drake Passage, one of the most violent stretches of ocean on Earth, to reach a waiting station on South Georgia Island. For 16 days, the small crew fought against hurricane-force winds and 40-foot rogue waves, furiously bailing water around the clock
to avoid capsizing in the freezing swells. They successfully navigated across the open sea to a tiny speck in the Southern Ocean, eventually crashing their battered boat onto the uninhabited windward side of South Georgia. Shackleton and 2 men left the others behind and marched continuously for 36 hours over unmapped glaciers, equipped with nothing but 50 feet of rope and a single carpenter's adze. Their margin of error had shrunk to 0. Stripped of their ship, their ice camp, their gear, and their boat, their survival was fueled entirely by sheer human will. Staggering into the industrial whaling station, the 3 men were unrecognizable. Their faces were blackened by blubber smoke, their hair was matted, and their clothes were shredded into rags. Shackleton immediately secured a vessel, but the sea ice blocked his path. It took 4 agonizing months and 4 separate rescue attempts to finally punch through the frozen barrier surrounding Elephant Island. On August 30th, 1916, Shackleton looked through his binoculars to discover that all 22 men left behind on the desolate beach were still alive. The ship that brought them there, the Endurance, remained hidden deep in the Weddell Sea until 2022, when an underwater drone captured footage of its perfectly preserved wooden wreck. 28 men vanished into the ice, and 28 men walked out. Shackleton had failed to cross the continent, but in the face of absolute resource erasure, his management of the men themselves became his definitive legacy.